Chapter 19, A Blessing of Sorts. 5 nights later, at bedtime, Janie noticed the nice thing that Bat had done to thank her for coming up with the perfect name for Thor. It had taken him 2 days to forgive Janie for being so mean during spaghetti night, and another day to come up with an idea. He'd been waiting ever since for Janie to notice, so when she called out from her bedroom, "Mom, have you seen the top part of my unicorn pajamas?" Bat felt excited. "I did all the laundry that was in the basket," Mom answered. "You washed the bottoms, but not the top," Janie said. "Then you must have not put the top in the laundry basket." "Why would I put the bottoms, but not the top?" Janie asked. "Why would I wash just the bottoms if the top was in the basket too?" Mom asked back. Then it was time for Bat to reveal the nice thing. "I know where your unicorn pajama top is," he said. "You do?" said Mom and Janie together. "Yes," Bat said. "I took it out of the dirty laundry basket." "Why would you do that?" Mom asked. "Because if I waited until after you washed it, then Thor wouldn't recognize Janie's scent." Janie had been the one to name Thor. Even though Bat didn't like the idea of sharing Thor with anyone, Janie had earned the right for Thor to know who she was. "Did you give that rodent my pajama top?" Janie's voice climbed higher and higher. "Actually," Bat said, "skunks aren't rodents. They're Mephididae. People used to think that they belonged in the same family as weasels, ferrets, and badgers, but this scientist named Dr. Jerry Dragoo figured out that—" "It doesn't matter, Bat," Janie said, interrupting him. "Go get my pajama top right now." "But it does matter," said Bat. Janie was not interested in hearing the difference between Mephididae and Mustelidae. She refused to listen to anything until after Bat had gone to Thor's enclosure and retrieved the unicorn pajama top from the pile where Thor slept. And when he tried to hand it to her, she wouldn't even take it. "It smells like an animal," she said. "It smelled like an animal before too," Bat said. "Because I took it from the dirty laundry basket, and it smelled like you." She didn't scream exactly. Bat didn't know what to call the sound that she made just before she spun around, stomped back into her room, and slammed the door. Bat felt tears gathering, ready to spill. Mom came over and hugged him tightly. She didn't say anything, but she rocked him back and forth in the way he liked. And after a moment, Bat felt the sting of his tears begin to fade. "That was a nice gesture," Mom murmured into his hair. Bat liked the hot warmth of her breath. "Baby skunks are easier than sisters," Bat said. "That may be true," Mom answered, "but there are a lot of baby skunks in the world, and you only have one sister." Gently, she took Janie's pajama top from Bat's hand. He hadn't realized that he was still clutching it. "Come on," she said. "I'll teach you how to do laundry." "Okay," said Bat, "but first I need to check one thing." He stuck his head into Thor's enclosure to make sure the kit was settling back in after having the nest disturbed. Thor was sleeping soundly, making a noise like a tiny little snore. Bat pulled one of his own t-shirts up over Thor's body, tucking him in. Then he latched the enclosure and followed Mom to the laundry room. "Maybe if we use extra fabric softener," he said, "and make the pajama top softer than it's ever been, then maybe Janie won't be so mad." "I think that's a very good idea," Mom said, "and you can pour it in." Chapter 20, Problems. "Earth to Bat," Mr. Grayson said. Bat looked up. He had been staring at his math work in front of him, but he hadn't been doing any problems. Usually, Bat liked math problems because he was good at them, and they made sense. Usually, Bat asked for extra math problems when he was done with his regular math problems, but today, Bat didn't feel like doing the regular math problems, even though they were easy. Today, all Bat could think about was that time was passing very quickly, and that he still hadn't heard back from Dr. Jerry Dragoo, world skunk expert. "You look like you're having a hard time focusing today, Bat," said Mr. Grayson. "I'm not having a hard time focusing," said Bat. "Let me rephrase that. You look like you're having a hard time focusing on your schoolwork today, Bat." "Yes," said Bat. "I am focused on something else." He can't think about anything other than that stupid baby skunk, said Luca. Thor isn't stupid, Bat said. He felt his throat grow tighter with anger. Once my dog got sprayed by a skunk when we were camping, Israel said. He was stinky for a week. Okay, said Mr. Grayson. This is all very interesting, but right now is math time, not skunk time. There should be skunk time at school, thought Bat. He picked up his pencil and forced his brain to focus on math problems. Most of them were too easy to even bother working out on paper, but he showed all the steps because Mr. Grayson liked it when they showed their work, and Bat liked Mr. Grayson. While part of Bat's brain worked with his hand to do the math work, he let another part of his brain think about skunk time. If there were a skunk time at school, like math time and language arts time and yoga time, then maybe Bat could bring Thor with him. Maybe skunk time would be when everyone in class did research about skunks and wrote reports about skunks and built skunk dioramas. Over the last week, Bat had spent as much time as he could with Thor, but every day he had to leave him when it was time for school. The kid's fur was growing in all over, fuzzy, wild black hair with a bright white stripe down the center, from the tip of his nose to the tip of his tail. He was still small enough to fit curled into a little ball in Bat's 2 hands. And he'd had plenty of time to spend with Thor because Janie had barely spoken to him since the pajama top incident. She spent all of her time in her room practicing the Off With Her Head song for her Queen audition and going over to Ezra's house. Now, and every other Friday was coming, and Bat would have to go with Janie to Dad's house. Even worse, no matter how much Bat begged and pleaded and bounced up and down, no matter how clearly he explained to Mom why she should change her mind, Thor would not be going to Dad's house with Bat and Janie. This every other Friday meant that Thor had already spent 2 weeks living with Bat and his family, and if Bat didn't find a way to change Mom's mind in 2 more weeks, Thor would be leaving for a rescue center. Thor will be fine, Bat, Mom said. Lawrence is going to take him for the weekend. It wasn't that Lawrence couldn't do a good job of taking care of animals, Bat thought as he was finishing the last row of math problems. It wasn't that Bat didn't trust Lawrence. It was just that, Bat didn't want anyone else taking care of the skunk kit. What if Lawrence did a better job? What if Thor was happier at Lawrence's house than at their house? And even if Lawrence was trustworthy, no one was perfect. What if Lawrence put the animal carrier on the top of his car while he unlocked the door, and when he forgot, it was up there and he drove away? What if Lawrence went out to get some ice cream and didn't remember to lock the door to his house and someone broke into it and stole Thor? Even if everything went just right, at the end of the weekend, they would be 2 days closer to Thor leaving them forever. Just thinking about that made Bat feel queasy, like he'd been jumping on a trampoline with a stomach full of pizza. Bat, said Mr. Grayson, do you need to take a little break? Bat stopped tapping his heels under the table. He pulled the neck of his t-shirt, which he'd been sucking on in a way he'd sometimes did when he felt nervous, out of his mouth. He set his pencil down. Yes, please, he said. In the back of the room, Baby Cake sat placidly licking a light pink wheel of salt. Her ears flopped to the side in relaxation. Bat wished he felt as calm as Baby Cake's looked. He climbed into her enclosure and sat cross-legged beside her, scratching behind her ears and thinking about the weekend. If his parents weren't divorced, then he wouldn't have to leave home every other weekend and go to his dad's dumb apartment. If his parents weren't divorced, Thor wouldn't be spending the weekend with Lawrence. Chapter 21, Organizational Systems. At least Dad liked to go to the candy store as much as Bat did. That was one good thing about every other weekends. On Saturday mornings after breakfast and dishes, Dad pulled their bicycles out of his garage. Unlike the garage at home, which was twice as big and 4 times as crowded, Dad's garage was labeled and organized. Helmets were kept in a clear plastic bin marked helmets. The bikes, instead of leaning up against the wall or on each other, were pulled neatly into a bike rack like the one at school. and Dad always arranged them in order of size, left to right, large, medium, small. A metal rack in one corner held car supplies, spare containers of oil, a big jug of windshield wiper fluid, a little vacuum that sat ready on its charger. There was a tool bench, too, an assortment of wrenches swung from hooks across the front. Coffee cans held screws and nails. Sometimes Dad let Bat pound nails into scrap pieces of wood, as long as he wore safety goggles. Bat approved of Dad's garage. It was just under a 1-mile ride to the Sugar Shack, Bat's favorite candy store. To get there, Bat and Janie and Dad rode out of Dad's apartment complex and down the bike path towards Central Quincy. They crossed the river and the bridge on a bridge made just for bicycles and pedestrians before turning onto 3rd Street. While Bat was double-checking the lock on his bike outside the Sugar Shack, he heard someone say his name. It was Israel from school. It took Bat a second to figure out who he was because Bat hadn't ever seen Israel anywhere but at school and never on a weekend. "What are you doing here?" Israel asked. He was smiling in a way that showed almost all his teeth. He had, Bat noticed, a piece of something green, maybe cucumber, stuck in between the 2 front teeth. "We're going to buy some candy," Bat said. "Cool," Israel said. Then he said, "We just had brunch next door," and he pointed to the Broken Yoke Cafe. A man and woman were pushing through the door just then, and they waved. Israel waved back. "That's what I would have guessed," Bat said. "You have food in your teeth." Israel's smile fell away. "Okay," said Bat. "See you Monday at school." "Hey," said Israel. "Wait." Bat waited. "I was wondering about the skunk. Do you still have him?" "Of course I do," said Bat. "Then, well, not right now because I have to spend the weekend with my dad." "Oh," said Israel. "I didn't know your parents were divorced." Bat didn't say anything to that because it wasn't a question. Still, Israel stood there on the sidewalk like he was waiting for Bat to say something. The grown-ups who had waved at Israel walked over and stood behind him, and now it felt like all 3 of them were waiting for Bat to say something or do something. "Well, goodbye," Bat said, and he walked away. "Hey, Sport, is that a friend from school?" Dad's face looked just as about excited as it looked when he was watching baseball. "Bat doesn't have friends," Janie said, but not in a mean voice, just a matter-of-fact voice. "I'm sure that's not true," Dad said. "It's not true," Bat answered. "Lawrence is my friend, and Mr. Grayson." "Oh, Bat, grown-ups don't count," Janie said. Then she pulled open the door to the candy store and held it for Bat to pass inside. The Sugar Shack was an exceptional candy store. It had bins full of M&Ms separated into colors, so if you wanted exactly 11 greens and 11 blues, but no yellows, reds, or oranges, as Bat did, you could get exactly that. Along the back wall were all the gummies: gummy bears, gummy worms, gummy sharks, gummy hippos, gummy rhinos, gummy jellyfish, gummy dinosaurs, gummy frogs, gummy sea stars, gummy zebras, gummy camels, gummy parrots, gummy crabs. But Bat didn't like gummy candy, but he always got one gummy sea star anyway. He liked the way it felt in his hand. Big barrels full of hard candies formed the aisles. Jawbreakers and gumballs and candy necklaces and hard candy and ring pops. Just inside the door was a case of jelly beans arranged in a rainbow of colors. Near the counter stood a candy bar display with all the ordinary stuff, but hard to find. Chocolate bars too, like Violet Crumble bars and Zagnut bars. "You sure inherited my sweet tooth," Dad said, loading up on his own plastic bag with jelly beans. "Actually," Bat said, "teeth have nothing to do with it. People taste with their tongues and their noses." "Do you stick the gummy bear up your nose to taste it?" Janie asked. Her bag was full of a mismatch of candies that didn't make any sense to Bat. "It's a gummy sea star," Bat said. "And no, the way people smell is part of how you taste it." "Well, I guess that's why people don't eat skunk meat," Janie said. "Pew!" She wrinkled up her nose and stuck out her tongue. "Thor doesn't stink," Bat said. "He doesn't even spray yet." "But he will," Janie said. "I hope not until after we give him to the rescue." "Maybe we'll keep him," Bat whispered. Sport, your mom can't adopt every stray animal that comes into her clinic, Dad said. She'd have a zoo if she did. We won't adopt all of them, Bat said, just this one. Mom said we're only going to keep him for a couple more weeks, Janie told Dad, but Bat is getting too attached. Bat started bouncing on the balls of his feet. He clutched the plastic bag in his fists. It crinkled in a way that bothered his ears. So he loosened his fingers and let go. Blue and green M&Ms bounced and rolled across the floor of the sugar shack. Sport, you've got to be more careful, Dad said, his eyebrows pointing in at his nose. Bat felt tears welling up in his eyes. He swiped at his face with the arm of his shirt and turned towards the door. Under the sole of his shoe, he felt the crunch squish of a flattened M&M.